Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Perez coming to you from Baltimore. FBI Director James Comey has been at the epicenter of a brewing storm since Friday, when Comey sent a letter to Congress stating that the investigation into whether Hillary Clinton disclosed classified information with her private server is going to be reopened. Just days before the election, this is considered unprecedented, as Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid sent a letter to Comey accusing him of having violated the Hatch Act, which prohibits public servants from influencing an election. The reason given for reopening the investigation is that the FBI discovered emails on a computer belonging to Anthony Weiner, the estranged husband of one of Clinton's top aides, Huma Abedin. Joining us now from Twin Cities, Minnesota, to take a closer look at this is Coleen Rowley. Coleen is a former FBI special agent and division counsel. In 2002, she was named one of Time magazine's Persons of the Year for having exposed some of FBI's pre-9/11 failures. Thanks for joining us, Coleen.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So, Coleen, what do you think the FBI Director Comey is trying to achieve by sending this letter to Congress and reopening the investigation just days before the election?
I have to preface everything with the fact that it's very difficult to intelligently opine without knowing the facts. So we have news articles, reporting different things, but no one knows what these emails, and apparently there are hundreds of thousands of them that have to be reviewed. They don't even know if they go, if they pertain only to the security issues of having kept this information on a private server and exchanged information with others. They don't know if it only goes to that, or if it perhaps even goes to something far more scandalous and far more serious, which would be the allegations of corruption on the part of the Clinton Foundation. There are reports that say that, if you review things, you might find more. So that's one of the problems. I think with Comey, I wrote an op-ed back on the day of his Senate confirmation hearing, and I was actually trying to basically refute some of the mostly undeserved reputation for integrity that he had gained at that point. And this all went back to this famous hospital standoff with Ashcroft in the hospital room. And Comey and the FBI director at the time, Mueller, had stood up to the John Yoo Office of Legal Counsel interpretation after 9/11, which installed a form of martial law in the United States based on imperial war presidency powers. And so, to his credit, Comey stood up to that. But then people really thought, well, he's really got integrity. In fact, the senators at the time, almost unanimously, with one dissent, confirmed him. He sailed through this confirmation. My op-ed really didn't matter, asking some of these tough questions, because Comey had signed on to the torture tactics, and he had signed on to the warrantless monitoring, even though he stood up a little bit to it in the sense of the basis for it. They went back to their drawing board and found a legal loophole. And so this background is important to understand. The other thing about James Comey is he's been around the block. He's not a saint, he's not a villain, but he's been around the block. He goes all the way back to being an investigator of the Whitewater scandal, not to mention having appointed Patrick Fitzgerald, who investigated Dick Cheney and Scooter Libby and all of the other Bush administration officials for disclosing Valerie Plame's identity. So he had the reputation of being nonpartisan or being bipartisan. And I think that's being lost right now, because we're in this 8 days to the election, and there is a fever pitch of partisanship right now, which actually now is falling on him as the messenger. He wrote this letter, and so they're essentially shooting the messenger of the bad tidings that there still is more investigation of Hillary Clinton.
So then why didn't he wait till after the election to get these accusations out of the way?
One thing with Harry Reid, for instance, is accusing him of improper influence And of course, that's very illegal via the Hatch Act if you are trying to actually influence an election. But if he was to stay quiet, if you think about it, that's also influencing an election, especially given the fact that he had been out telling, in a public statement as well as to Congress, saying that the investigation of Hillary Clinton is closed. We found, yes, she was a little careless, but we cannot prosecute her. And so I think his fear was that that would be what would stand. And in fact, that is a very political statement. It cleared the way for her to run and not, and have voters think the better of her. The other thing is, if you remember, Loretta Lynch met with Bill Clinton, and that really cast a taint upon her. And so what happened with Comey is he kind of took the brunt, he kind of took the fronting that decision for Lynch, because it was, Lynch was going to be criticized no matter what she did because she had met with Bill Clinton. So he kind of shouldered that responsibility. And I think then afterwards he felt a responsibility that he maybe had to correct the record when that investigation was reopened.
Now, Coleen, we clearly don't know anything yet about the newest batch of emails and what might be contained in them. In fact, Comey disclosed that we don't know what's in them. If that is the case, then how can he put so much weight on these emails?
Well, I don't think he's putting weight on it. I think he erred, he may have erred in more ways than one in disclosing this. If all these hundreds of thousands of emails, once they are reviewed, don't contain anything, obviously, I think his days are numbered, and I think that, the fact that this maybe only went even to the security that had previously been already hashed out, of course, I think he will probably be forced to resign. Certainly if Hillary Clinton is elected, she will probably force him to resign. An FBI director is supposed to serve a 10-year term, and unless they really are caught in some highly illegal act, I think that would normally be the case. Otherwise, trying to fire an FBI director simply because you don't like what they're doing would also have its repercussions. If you remember right, that's what Nixon did in a way. He tried to fire the investigators of himself. But anyway, I think that he kind of took a risk that way. He doesn't know what they are. If there are serious indications of criminal activity, let's say things that do go to the Clinton Foundation, and here's some questions that we have. One of the things is Hillary Clinton did destroy some emails, and that is out there. Now, if there was a reason why she bleached her computer and that she really did want to get rid of something that was much more incriminating than just this mere security lapse, we don't know this. Again, this is just, everybody can speculate, everyone can have an opinion. It comes down to partisanship right now because we don't know. And I think James Comey is trying to walk a tightrope here. He's trying to do the right thing without really knowing what is all involved.
Let's take a look at the timing of these computers. Now, seriously, this is Weiner's computer, and Uma must have been using this computer, but this computer is in the possession of the FBI. When did it come into their possession? And is it before the email scandal involving Hillary Clinton?
I'm not 100% clear on that. It's my understanding that the Weiner investigation, I think there's been more than one allegation of Weiner's sexual improprieties, and this latest one is his sexting of a 15-year-old. Okay, so I don't think that this did start too long ago. I think it was just initiated, I don't know how long, a month, 2 months, but I think it did come after the investigation of Hillary emails storing of her or using her private server. And I was just going to explain, people are all confused about this. Well, how can you know it's relevant in there, or how can you think it might be pertinent, and how can the FBI have done a search of this computer? Well, here's my best guess on that as a prior legal instructor. When you are conducting a search that is narrowly tailored, and in this case, the one that would have been illegal pursuant to warrant of Weiner's, of his computer would have been regarding the sexting, okay? But when you're conducting that search, it might be that you see something else in what they call in legal terms, plain view. So, for instance, if the police come into your house and they're looking for drugs, but then they see an Uzi right there, even though their warrant doesn't specify the Uzi, they could say, well, we saw that in plain view. And the same thing pertains to search warrants. And so in this case, when they saw, I'm just, again, these are educated guesses, when they saw these other emails, what they needed then was to go back to a judge and get a warrant that expanded the scope of their search, that allowed them then to review these other things. And I think the public is very confused about this because they don't understand a lot of this legal stuff. I've also read that when that happened, when the FBI in New York went back and said we need to widen the scope of the search warrant, and this could be wrong reporting, who knows, but there's been some reporting that the Department of Justice then did not want that to happen. They said, 8 days to the election, we don't want to know. We're not going to sign off on a wider warrant. And that then some of the FBI agents thought, well, this is a cover-up. This is wrong. If we have evidence of a crime, you have to sign off on a warrant. And so that's something that's out there as a speculation. Again, these are things we don't know, but it would fit very much with what I know about the law and how these warrants work when you're searching a computer.
Right. Now, apparently, one of the other questions out there is that the Department of Justice had warned Comey against doing this. If that's the case, what do we know about it, and why did they advise him against doing it?
Well, I think there would generally always be a policy rule that you would not go out with any kind of public disclosure before an election. I've read that that's a 60-day rule. It's not law per se. The Hatch Act would be the law, and in to violate the Hatch Act, I think you actually have to intend to influence an election, or at least your actions. It has to be foreseeable that your actions would have this impact upon influencing an election. So the law is the Hatch Act, but this policy about not saying something public about any candidate would always be the rule. And obviously, if it was something that was not very, let's say a misdemeanor level investigation or something like that, it would not be proper. This case, though, I think because of all of if you look at all of the importance of Comey, I think this cut into national news when he went out publicly and said, we're closing the case on looking at Clinton's emails. If you look at that, and now you look at the fact that by keeping quiet, I'm going to bring up one more thing here, which just occurred to me. You remember all of the Democrats and my group, many of the people I was associated with were very upset when the New York Times failed to allow their reporters to publish the story before the 2004 election that said that found out that Cheney and Bush were illegally monitoring Americans. James Risen and some other reporters had found this out before the 2004 election, and their editors told them, you can't go forward publicly until, they didn't say until Bush is safely reelected, but that was one of the reasons, because it was so close to the election. And the Democrats were outraged by that because, you kept it quiet, and then we voted Bush in, and here he was committing an unconstitutional act. Now, I think that this is something that had to also be in James Comey's mind. He lived through that period of time, by the way. And I think he had to understand that keeping quiet about something that is illegal can have as many adverse ramifications. And again, it all depends on the $64 million question. How serious, what is in these emails, and how serious, if anything, is the criminal activity that the emails might show, if anything.
Now, if you were to consider the worst-case scenario here, there is criminal activity disclosed in that collection of emails. What will happen if Hillary Clinton is elected president?
Well, I think what I wrote on Facebook to a friend today is, remember that music for the Twilight Zone? Da, 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 da. if you go back to Watergate era, those legal questions that arose, that went up to the Supreme Court, whether that they could get a hold of the tapes, the White House tapes, etc. You are entering unprecedented territory legally, where our checks and balances, as wise as the founding fathers were, did not really, or maybe they couldn't even, anticipate high-level criminal activity. And so when you get a president who is involved in, and again, we're talking about the worst case possibility here, but if you get a president who is committing illegal acts, and there is a political will then, as there was during Watergate, you don't know how this is going to play out. It is, again, everybody can venture their opinions on this. I'm sure the law professors will be doing so. One question that arose was, could Obama now pardon Hillary Clinton preemptively and get it, so that would be in the background. And of course, it sounds kind of very unprecedented to pardon someone before they're even convicted. But no one knows. No one knows. Could that even be legal? And if he could pardon Hillary Clinton preemptively, then what's to stop any future president from committing all kinds of criminal acts and pardoning everybody ahead of time? I mean, so these are things that the founding fathers, in their wisdom, and they really did a good job of checks and balances between Congress and the executive branch and the Supreme Court, but it did not anticipate high-level criminal activity. And when you get into this area, it will probably be a constitutional crisis, and what I was calling the Twilight Zone.
Coleen, there's a lot of speculation out there that there might be more leaks coming out, and that there might also be a rebellion within the FBI. What's that all about?
Well, I think Rudy Giuliani, the old U.S. Attorney for New York, is fueling that. And I worked actually not closely, but I worked in Rudy Giuliani's, FBI back in the 1980s. And I would not necessarily believe all of that. I think it could be some hype about the level of rebellion in the FBI. But if anyone in the FBI does feel that someone tried to conduct an investigation that was not according to the normal protocol, that there was a double standard or treating Hillary Clinton with kid gloves, if that was the case, then there would be a lot more chance that some of these people will talk. I know that there's one high-level former FBI executive, James Kallstrom, who has said this. And so obviously, people talk, and that could spur more leaks. I think that there could be more information coming out, but I don't know for sure.
All right, Coleen, I thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be keeping an eye on this and looking forward to having you back, as I'm sure you will be also watching over how this situation proceeds.
Yes, I will.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.